I just want to make a comment on the financialization of the international food market and the solution. You know that after the 2008 food crisis, so like Philippines, Indonesia, moved to have government-to-government contract with Vietnam, with expectation that government we had to keep reputation, and then we can deliver food to Philippines or Indonesia in the case they need. But the point that the for government to government contract is costly, even though the Philippine government or Indonesian government have contract with Vietnamese government, but they still afraid that in some case if Vietnam cannot export rice to the Philippines and to Indonesia, they'll be in trouble. And such kind of mistrust is further threatened by food speculation. So the point that it's costly for the Philippine and the Indonesian government to make a lot of investment to try to subsidize, to protect the food industry, the rice production in the Philippines and Indonesia is also costly already. And the transaction in the government to government contract is there's a lot of not good behavior among trader and the government officer. People to play with the price. So that's why in Vietnam we strongly recommend our government open some policy for the enterprise in Vietnam to work with Filipino enterprise and Indonesian enterprise, for the long-term private investment partnership. That we can make sure that this paddy field Vietnam is for the Philippine consumer. So it's a long-term investment, and you can send people to Vietnam to monitor, follow your standard, follow your taste, follow your preference. So I think it's a way that we can avoid both the very costly government-to-government contract as well as to avoid the kind of food speculation. The second command is for the global and local shock, like the case Vietnam. I may say that as the exporting country, we really afraid of global shock because we have a very huge amount of price surplus in the country. So whenever there's some market shock, the government have big trouble. Either we have to give some budget to procure the rice from farmer, or we have to think about the way to export the rice. So that's why one of our recommendation for the country like Vietnam with huge amount of rice surplus. Like last year we exported around 8 million tons of rice, that we may diversify some paddy land to other crop that is more profitable for farmer. For the also another command on how to keep some profitability for farmer, for smallholding farmer in the food value chain. It's a very good idea, but in practice, even though I tell you the case Vietnam, the government set up the target that we have to keep at least 30% of profit for the smallholding rice farmer, but the government don't know how to make it work in practice, because with the rice value chain now is very fragmented with too many layers of local trader, and the state-owned enterprises who get the subsidy from the government, they don't have direct contract with farmer. That's why such kind of target we only can achieve if we have the kind of, in Vietnam we call small farm black field model, that we have the contract between the export enterprise with farmer, and who apply the same technology, the same certified seed, the same cultivation method to improve the quality of the rice, and they can negotiate with the enterprises for some profit from the improvement of the value chain. Thank you.
Good. Okay, let's open up a bit more. We haven't had any comments yet about the political economy of governments insulating markets in times of spiking prices. Presumably that must play a role as to why governments tend to choose trade measures, perhaps, to insulate their markets rather than more direct forms of, presumably lower cost forms of intervention, such as social safety nets, if they exist, but maybe they're very expensive in poor countries. Any comments along those lines or other lines?
My question was not responding to integration of WTO and aid for trade as to substitute the imports into Africa.
Does anybody want to have a go at that?
You were the one asking about. Sorry, can you repeat?
What I was talking about is a market of 40 billion US per year. We have to subtract a little bit of champagne and wine from France, California, and wherever. But for the rest, it's about 40 billion imports into Africa. To substitute those by its own production, enabling conditions must be put in place. WTO talks about regional integration, enhanced action frameworks, and so on and so forth. And the instrument of aid for trade is being applied now. Australia having merged the foreign trade and development agenda. Canada has done the same, the Dutch the same. What do you think? Who's talking now about Africa really moving forward, being very vulnerable because of its dependency on the imports? If they wouldn't have been dependent on the imports, but had been food sovereign to 100%, the effects of the international food price crisis would have been much less than a dependency of 40 billion. So the imports at highest prices need to be substituted by local production. I come from a place where after the war in Europe, food sovereignty, not safety, sovereignty was the indicator for a healthy food system. So for Africa, I think this is at least food for thought, being dependent. And we all know that the big organizations have advised African countries not to invest into agricultural production, food safety and nutrition safety over years. And, that has, so to say, backfired now. And, the decrease in investments, we can read it everywhere, over 10 years or 15 years into the agricultural sector. I think they need to be compensated now. So the simple question, WTO, regional integration, aid for trade, substitution of 40 billion by its own production in Africa.
Okay, but you are combining that with food sovereignty, which is a different issue. No, my point will be very simple. What you care is that people and countries have access to food. And you can have access to food in two ways. You can produce your own, or you can have income to buy it. So if I have competitive advantage in producing something which is not necessarily is food, but will provide me the income, and I can buy with that income the food I need, I am perfectly okay. I don't need to be producing things if I am not competitive in doing that. Now, the major problem arises when you have lack of access. So despite you have the money, you don't have food to buy. And that's what happened in certain period of the 2007, 2008, where many countries had the money to buy, but they couldn't access to food. Okay, and that's a constraint, and that's a global constraint, which is different to what you are referring. Now, within Africa, I think that clearly Africa is a regional issue, and it's not a country-level issue. And that's pretty important at all levels. It's important at the reserve level, and it's important at the trade levels. If you look at the tariff dispersion of the African countries in the region, is enormous. You have countries which don't have a dispersion and countries that have huge levels of tariff protection within the country. And that's something that the region has to resolve. And that variance, I had a nice graph of the evolution over time of the level of protection and the level of exports and the share of exports within African countries with respect to the world. And that's something that they have to improve. Look, for example, the case of Latin America, okay, which had problems, significant problems in many of the regions. Specifically, look at Chile, look at Peru, look at Colombia. Forget Brazil, forget Argentina, which always have large scale production. Those countries are completely open to markets. They have significant number of trade agreements, and they are able to buy because they have income and they are able to have access to food, and they have improved significantly what they produce. Chile has decided to produce high value commodities and not the staple crops. Peru is moving again to high value commodities and not to staple crops because they provide more income but they import wheat and they import other commodities. So the point, I think, and where I think the regional integration will help enormously, it will give you economies of scale, it will improve efficiency because of lower transaction costs to move commodities, and it will allow to help to start to resolve the problem within the region. But it doesn't restrict them to avoid to have other economic opportunities to access to to commodities from other countries and to specialize in whatever they are more efficient. Ethiopia, for example, you have huge efficiency in teff. I came to know that you have a huge capacity of hard wheat to be able to supply the productions of pasta, which the country is not supplying. That's a huge market. Why they are not exploiting that, that's something that they need to look at. So it depends on the country, and you need to look case by case where you have comparative advantage.